Hi, welcome to Infodumpies. I'm Brianne. I'm autistic, I'm ADHD, my pronouns are she, her, and I am a daywalker, bridging the gap between the worlds of night and day, forever torn between them, but belonging to neither.
And I'm Violet. My pronouns are she, her. I have ADHD. And earlier today, I met with some vampires who shot lasers at my face. I don't know what that had to do with them being vampires, but it was great.
And our guest today is Bobby. Bobby is autistic. His pronouns are he, him, and he said I had to formally invite him to the Zoom meeting or he couldn't enter. All right, so Bobby's here today to teach us all about Bela Lugosi.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So I met Bobby on TikTok, and Bobby makes some really great content about Bela Lugosi and Dracula and Universal monsters in general too, and also about being autistic. And I love your stuff. I always learned so much. Vampires are what part of my sphere of autistic special interest, and I think ours have enough overlap that it's like I learn a lot of things, and it feels like I get to learn new stuff about my special interests, because mine are like very much 90s vampire stuff, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer specifically, but I also just love vampires in general. And the other show we make is like a comedy that has vampires in it. Like Violet voices a character named Carmilla.
Cool.
So, yeah, I love vampires.
That's so cool.
And I'm so excited to learn about Bela Lugosi.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And I love your videos too. I learned a lot
Thank
from
you.
them too.
Yeah, I'm not as big of like a vampire knowledge person. When Brianne and I started dating, she was like, so there's this one thing in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I was like, I've never seen that. And she was like, you've never seen Buffy the Vampire Slayer? And so I watched the whole thing. It took a while, but watched it start to finish. I'm watching Angel currently, and so that's where
cool.
the majority of my vampire knowledge comes from, and also just through her. I'll be fully honest. I know next to nothing about Bela Lugosi, so I'm very excited. I'm a complete blank slate here.
I'm always happy to talk about Bela Lugosi.
Heck yeah. You're in the right place for it.
So, can you tell us when you first got interested in Bela Lugosi?
So, I first saw Dracula. It was I saw Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein first, and then I saw like other Dracula things. But I didn't see Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein on the regular because it was at my dad's house, and he kind of controlled like what movies we watched, and then I saw Dracula when I was 7. And then when I was I think it was like a year later, I saw the documentary Monster Mania hosted by Jack Palance. And that's where I learned my first Bela Lugosi fact. I'll never forget it. It was, and they were talking about how he played Dracula, and he said it didn't hurt that he created the role on Broadway, and he was born and raised in the real live wilds of Transylvania. And that just blew my mind. This is the coolest guy ever.
Heck yeah.
There's always a very special feeling when you learn something and you're like, oh, I'm going to be into this.
Yeah, this has
Like,
awoken something in me.
You can tell this is going to be a thing I'm obsessed with. I can feel it.
Right? Yeah, that's how it felt immediately. Like, what? Like,
I have to learn everything.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell us a little about Bela? Like, where did he get his start?
So he was born in Lugos, Hungary, which is because Transylvania is a region, so it's not an exact country. It's like more like a general geographical area.
Okay.
And wait, hold on a second. My dog's trying to bite my feet.
You're good.
You're not Bela Lugosi. You're not allowed to do that. You calm down now.
We have three dogs, and Violet's got one in her room. So any dog interruptions are
I don't know.
any dog interruptions are more than understood.
Oh, cool. Bela had dogs too.
Oh, really?
He had this is funny. He always had big dogs, and one of them bit Spanky's dad from the Little Rascals. One of his dog bit Spanky's dad, and he had to rush because he didn't have the paperwork done yet. So he had to rush and hurry to get the paperwork done real quick after that.
Oh my gosh, that's wild.
So Bela Lugosi started. So he started in he was born in Lugos, Hungary. and he just always wanted to be an actor. So he would perform like plays in like local empty warehouses in the area, and then he ran away from home. He always said 12, like recent evidence suggests it was more like 14, 16. But he left and he became an actor like in Hungary. He played all sorts of stage roles, and he did the Hungarian play Lilium. He played Jesus Christ. He was in the National Theater of Budapest, and there they had a ranking system where they would different actors would play the same roles, and they would do different versions of the same play, and they would rank the actors against each other, like they'd be competing against each other. And he was ranked at one point as number one.
Like literal competitive acting. That's really cool.
Yeah, and then he served in World War One. And he didn't have to, because actors were actually exempt from military service, and but he wanted to. And then after World War One, he got involved. He was involved in theater, but he was also involved. He was always very pro-union. And
hell yeah.
And so he actually helped. There was a revolution in Hungary, and with this revolution, he helped create the first ever combination stage and screen actor union. But unfortunately, 6 months later, another government came into power. So he was put on the enemies list. So him and his wife, Alona, they had to flee in the middle of the night. It was like really scary. Like they got word in the middle of the night. So they hid in this like wagon, and they got to an airplane. Like the police were shooting at them. Yeah, and then they escaped. They fled to Germany. And then and believe it or not, so he wasn't Nosferatu, but he played the butler, and F.W. Murnau, who directed Nosferatu, he did his own version of Jekyll and Hyde. And Bela Lugosi, he played the butler in that while he was in Germany. And then his wife's parents like called her to come back, and so she went back with them. And then Bela, there was a cargo ship going to America. And he told the captain that he had like sailor experience. He really didn't, but
that's a bold claim.
Yeah,
like, I can sail a boat. Yeah,
yeah.
How hard could it be?
But also, like the consequences are, well, we're in the middle of the ocean now. What are you gonna do?
Right? Yeah,
I can help
you. Hey, if you fuck it up real bad, who's gonna blame you? Nobody will know it.
Right? Yeah, right.
Nobody will know.
And plus, is it illegal in international waters to sail a boat?
Right? Yeah.
Oh my god, that's
He's like,
so funny.
I can figure it out.
I'll just act like a boat captain, and there we go.
Yeah, that was Bela. Like he would like bend the truth now and then, but he was always like very confident about it. Like, and then
so he came over on a cargo ship.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
Yeah, he came over on. He landed in New Orleans, which is actually like kind of a perfect vampire location.
But I was gonna say that's the perfect. That's the most vampire-y place in America.
Right. And it was kind of a scary boat ride too, because he was kind of bragging about the stuff he did, and apparently according to him, when the sailors heard he had like helped like in the revolution and everything, they kind of turned against him.
No.
So so they wanted to kill him. So he was like hiding in the hull, and I believe it was the engineer like would sneak him food.
Holy moly!
Whoa.
So he pretends to be captain or pretend to have sailing experience, so they let him on, and then when he gets on, they learn that he helped in the revolution, and so they're trying to kill him, and so he has to hide on the ship.
Yeah.
Oh my god! So they must have known he was somewhere on the ship the whole time and just gave up or something.
The details are very vague about it, but it's I mean, it had to be horrifying, because it seemed like it seemed like a couple of engineers. I think some people were helping him, and I don't know how active they were trying, how active the search was, but I know that like they turned against him.
That'd be scary.
Yeah. So once he gets in New Orleans, what does he do?
So he made his way to New York, and he was actually directing plays in the Hungarian theater community. And then he, in his early parts, his English parts, he didn't speak English yet, so he learned those phonetically. His early parts on stage.
Oh wow,
that's amazing.
And then that's like a running theme with Bela Lugosi is this the power of concentration.
Yeah, that's so hard. That's so hard.
I
Yeah,
could not imagine going on stage somewhere in like France or Italy, somewhere where I don't speak the language, and just repeating back the phonetic phrases that they tell me to say or something.
Like, I
yeah,
I have a
Mind
degree in
blowing.
linguistics. I have a degree in linguistics. I'm very good at phonetics, and I would be like, no, no, I
No,
right?
can't.
thank you.
I cannot. I cannot.
Because you have to kind of know what you're saying, like for the emotion to be right. Like,
Yeah.
And to memorize things that you have no, they are just sounds that have no meaning. You know what I mean? If the sounds
yeah,
don't have meaning to you, it's so much harder to memorize things.
right, yeah,
That's why memorizing numbers is harder for a lot of people because they have a value but not an actual meaning. So memorizing words when you don't know what the words mean, that's so hard. He might as well have been
Yeah.
memorizing strings of numbers.
right, yeah. Oh, that makes sense. Because I always had a hard time remember like math formulas and things like that.
Yeah, yeah. So that is incredible. That is
That really is.
incredible that he did that.
Yeah, and then he was doing like he did some plays on Broadway, and then when Horace Liverite, who was kind of like give you an idea, he was like sort of like a real life Great Gatsby. He was a
Cool.
Broadway
Huh.
producer, and he had like a secret doorway in his office that led to a
God.
party room. And
Sorry, what did you say his name was again?
Horace Liverite,
Horace Liverite. Cool.
That
and
is a
he
very
was
cool name.
right, and he was producing Dracula on Broadway, and
Okay.
it was a big. They had cast all the parts, and they had run out of money, and so they couldn't afford a big name actor. And then when they heard this guy who was like had been from Transylvania, they cast him. And during the first few weeks of rehearsal, Bela was just kind of like saying his lines. Just he wasn't really
Yeah.
acting, and everyone else was already like into character. And so Horace Liverite, he called him for a meeting in his office, and Bela explained, and they had like the date was like coming up where they had to do the dress rehearsal for the financial backers,
Oh my God.
and he explained, right now we work for a position. Our lines must be perfect. We save the performance for tomorrow evening.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and then he had it already. He was just like quietly preparing it.
That's
And
fucking
then
cool.
when they did it, the big scene they put on for the financial backers was the scene when he hypnotizes the maid, and he does from now on you will carry out any suggestion that reaches you from my brain instantly and without question. When I will you to do a thing, it shall be done.
And they were
That's
like, "Oh,
amazing.
they're like, he wasn't doing that in rehearsals."
Yeah, they were
Oh
blown
my
away.
God.
All right.
That would have given me some fucking goosebumps if I was like A, an
The other
investor,
actor?
and B, the other actor. I would have been like, whoa,
Right, yeah,
where did
because no
this
one
come
had
from?
expected this.
That is a really cool like way to go about that. Really interesting. Just like
Yeah,
wait till the right moment and then go all out.
right, yeah, and I think that's from what I understand, I think that's what Marlon Brando used to do too. Is like when he was on stage roles, is that at first he would like kind of mumble and like, and he
Huh.
didn't really have like first or like when it's like Streetcar Named Desire and stuff like that, and it wasn't until like and it took him like time to like formulate exactly what he wanted to do.
That's so interesting, especially just thinking about all the different schools of acting and like acting back then too. And
Yeah,
I don't know if it's being autistic or what, but when I'm voice acting, I'm doing it. I have to practice it a million different ways before I go, that's the one I like. That one sounds best to
yeah.
me. Like, so just to be like, I'm just going to say the lines and then what comes out would give me so much anxiety. I can't imagine doing
Right.
that.
So
I practice conversations to order food, you know?
I
Like,
do too.
that's very true. So I'm autistic, but I have ADHD. And so for me, I actually can kind of relate to that a little bit. Because sometimes I feel like if I've rehearsed something too much, I used to run professional games of Dungeons and Dragons, the
Oh
tabletop role playing
wow,
game.
cool.
And so that involves a lot of improvisation and just coming up with stuff off the top of your head. And I found that myself, if I rehearsed a scene or something like that to myself, when it actually came time to do it, I would like overthink it and like catch myself going, well, I did it better back then or something like that, and get too in my head. And so it really interesting. I relate to that a little bit. Like I was saving the energy for the moment. That's really cool. And I kind of vibe with that. That's so neat.
Autism experiences, you ordered that sandwich weird. Practice it in your head a million times so you can order a sandwich less weird.
Right. It's no ketchup, not negative ketchup.
Oh gosh.
I like negative ketchup. It's like I don't even want ketchup on the same area as my sandwich.
Yeah. Just throw some ketchup away as you're making it.
Right, yeah.
Oh gosh.
Destroy the Heinz factory at once.
Yes. Nuke it from orbit. It's the only way to be sure.
Right.
So when the investors see this, how do they respond? How do they take it?
They were blown away.
Gosh.
And they didn't have, because originally they had to put on another scene like for the backers. They didn't even have to do that because they were just that wowed by it.
That's awesome. They were like instantly like, here, take my money.
Right, yeah.
And Violet, I feel like you and I need to watch Bela's Dracula, because there is truly something otherworldly about how he delivers these things. And when you watch it, you'll be like, oh, every other person to play Dracula or like a Dracula coded vampire since then is like basing it off of Bela's Dracula. To some degree.
That makes a lot of sense, because like
he's the blueprint.
He is, yeah.
I've seen a lot of depictions of like Nosferatu-esque Dracula type depictions and things like that, and various things. And I have seen still images of Bela Lugosi's playing that character, and it's just like there is something otherworldly. I think that is the right word there. So I'm stoked. I want to watch it. Absolutely. Yeah.
It's amazing you mentioned it. Even like in the still shots, it's like it's still all there. You know, the otherworldliness, that menace, the creepy quality. Because that's what always amazes me so much about it is he really feels like a vampire.
And he's someone who he is acting with his entire body. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can see it in a still picture. You can see he's changing everything he does.
Yeah.
So there's a phrase that I've heard tossed around for only a few movies, but it's every frame is a painting. Would you say that applies here? Because it sounds like that's kind of the territory we're getting into.
Yeah.
Oh, I would definitely say that applies.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
You could take so many stills. That makes me super
excited.
Yeah. You could take a still of most of that version of Dracula, and it is art.
Yeah.
So cool.
every movement the way he would do his hand, the eyes, how he wouldn't blink, and the way even there's this part where he just like turns and you feel that he's undead.
Yeah, like the only other person I think who even comes close is maybe Doug Jones, of like acting with his full body, because he acts in prosthetics so much that when he's preparing for a role, he says he rents out a dance studio with the big mirrors and practices moving like that character and trying to figure out how do they walk, how do they turn, how do they sit, what's their resting, like figuring all of that out. And he said he'll spend like 5 to 8 hours figuring it out and take inspiration from different things. Like, I want to say for Star Trek, he was like thinking of like, there was one where he's thinking about matadors and he was trying to get movements down. But I feel like Bela probably did really similar stuff to figure out, to make every movement he did be a vampire.
Right, yeah. And something really interesting about him being from the real Transylvania area is like, especially the more rural people who like he would have encountered in the marketplace and stuff like that. Some of them would have really believed in vampires. So so his knowledge of vampires was based on the real legends of the Carpathian Mountains.
Oh wow. Mm-hmm. So he's probably basing what he's doing off of like people that he knows from real life telling him stories that they are invested in. Oh my gosh. Like, yeah. it would be like if someone was like telling you like, oh my god, it's hard to fathom because we don't in modern day, you know, it's so with the internet and everything, it's so hard to have like these stories of monsters and creatures that people actually believe in, you know.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, I feel like that's something that would be so hard to replicate nowadays. That experience of being told those stories. I wonder, do you think Bela Lugosi believed in vampires himself?
I I don't think so.
Huh.
I don't because he didn't seem like especially like interested like in the occult like that.
Okay.
He did this, but this was his quote, and I always liked it. I've never met the vampire personally, but you never know what tomorrow will bring.
That's very well said.
That's very well said. But yeah,
Thank you.
so after the stakeholders were like, shut up and take our money, this guy is wild, we love him. What was Bela up to next?
So we did the Broadway play, and it was a huge success. And he was considered a romantic idol
Really?
because you have to remember, like in the 1920s, because this was 1927, the Broadway play. In the 1920s, the big male hottie was Rudolph Valentino, and he had just died, and
Yeah.
Bela had some of those like same exotic qualities,
Yeah.
but he was as a vampire, as an evil vampire.
Yeah.
So it was an incredible smash. So he did the Broadway play, and he did tours across the country, and then Universal bought the rights for the movie, and he really wanted to do it, but they
Yeah.
were thinking first they were thinking Lon Chaney,
Hmm.
and then when he passed away, they were thinking Conrad Veidt. There were all these other actors that they wanted to have play Dracula. In the meantime, he was like writing them letters,
Oh my
saying
gosh.
how interested he was in playing Dracula. He helped negotiate the asking price with the Bram Stoker's widow to get that down, and just trying to like put himself into the forefront. And local California newspapers were like pulling for him because anyone who saw him do it like knew how
Yeah,
great he
they're like, he
was.
needs to play Dracula.
Yeah.
And it's not like they could be like, listen, here's a YouTube video of him playing Dracula to like
Right.
sell it to
Right.
them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that was not easy.
At the low price of only $500 a week. The for
Oh my gosh.
he signed on to play Dracula.
Dang, I think that's more than I'm making right now.
I know. I didn't mean that. I mean like for like actor salaries and
For
things like
actor
Oh yeah,
that.
no,
salary back
absolutely.
then.
With the whole like the strikes, SAG-AFTRA strikes and everything going on. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's great pay considering.
I was gonna say, I think he would also, since he started a union, you just made me think, like, he would also, if he were alive today, probably be like, hell yeah, SAG-AFTRA, go on strike.
Yeah, he would. Yeah.
I was gonna ask, so he started filming Dracula, right? In
Yeah.
what year?
It was like near the end of 1930.
Cool. And Dracula came out in 31, right?
Yeah, 1930. Yeah, right. Valentine's Day of 1931.
Valentine's
Valentine's
Yeah,
Day.
Day.
yeah,
Oh my
yeah.
That's
gosh.
amazing. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
And it was
That's
advertised as the story of the strangest passion the world has ever known.
Oh my gosh, that's a great tagline.
that.
I
It's
I bet
also
people went wild for that.
Oh, people loved it. People loved it. It was like the original audience. There's a scene when it's Van Helsing versus Dracula, and he pulls out a cross. And at this time, Dracula is the most horrifying thing audiences had seen. And when he pulled out the cross, the audience burst into applause.
Oh my
It was
gosh.
it was so suspenseful, because they're
That's
like
funny.
in American films, they had launched Phantom of the Opera and stuff like that, but this was the first real like full out supernatural monster.
And did he
Wild.
kind of like, I don't know the order of Universal Monster stuff, but did he kind of launch Universal Monsters into like people were obsessed with these supernatural movies?
He really did, yeah. Because like I said, like I mean, Phantom of the Lon Chaney came before Phantom of the
Yeah.
Opera and Hunchback of Notre Dame, but they're not really like supernatural characters like
Yeah.
that. So so like when Dracula came out, that's when they wanted to do Frankenstein was because of Dracula.
Oh
And
yeah.
originally they actually wanted he was going to be in Frankenstein, and Robert Florey was going to direct, and Bela he really wanted to play Dr. Frankenstein.
Oh, he would have
And
killed it.
later on
He would have
and
killed
later
it.
on
Yeah.
he did like a lot of mad scientists, so he would have been really good at that. the studio insisted he play the monster. I'm hoping to find out some more, a new biography of Bela Lugosi. The revised edition of The Man Behind the Cape is coming out this spring. So I'm hoping to find out like more information about this, because I think like some lost letters between Robert Florey and Bela Lugosi have surfaced.
Oh, cool.
But
Very cool.
Yeah, but Robert Florey was dropped from the project, and Bela, he did a makeup test as the monster, but then he turned it down. And to the script that he turned down, it wasn't quite up to the same levels of Boris Karloff's script. Like the monster didn't have any like sympathetic elements. It was a much more just a straightforward monster character.
I could see why he would drop that.
Yeah, because Frankenstein, I think, is only Frankenstein because of the sympathetic elements.
Yeah.
I think that was a good call.
Yeah. I do too. Like there's a scene like when in the finished film when Frankenstein, when he kills a little girl, and what happens is she's showing him how to like throw flowers in the water so that they float, and he's doing it too. And then when he throws her in and kills her, he's thinking she'll float too. But in the original script, the monster is he sees her and like wades through the water, and his whole intention is just to drown her.
Oh, yeah, that's much less. Yeah. Yeah, that's much less.
And that is changing such a core part of the story of Frankenstein, too.
Yeah, it
what
definitely
an odd choice.
is.
Right, yeah.
So in the wake of such a huge hit as Dracula and turning down Frankenstein, what did Bela do next?
Well, then the next part, they lined them up, Robert Florey and Bela, up with Murders in the Rue Morgue. But when Frankenstein was actually was the even bigger hit than Dracula, because I mean Dracula was one of the top 10 grossing movies of 1931, and it was but Frankenstein, it was number one.
Oh wow!
So the Universal went with Boris Karloff more, and they didn't they offered him a long-term contract, but not Bela. So then Bela, he wasn't working for any major studio. He would work for like sign for like multi-picture deals and like a picture here and there, as opposed to like the long-term contract systems that were so popular then.
Yeah, and for the listeners, I was going to tell the listeners, back then, rather than sign on to do a movie, and it could be movies at different studios, actors were signed on with a studio for a certain number of years and were kind of a workhorse for that studio. They would sign people and they would do a bunch of movies. And it was so much so that like the studios kind of owned them for that amount of time. They did not have as much privilege to turn down as much stuff from the studios, because it was like, no, you have a contract with Paramount or Universal or MGM. You got to do these movies for us in this time period.
Interesting.
So for Bela not to be signed on, and Boris, that's a big deal back then, because it was a completely different environment. So what did he do after that?
So he like would do different movies for different studios. He did like a White Zombie. He did Shandu the Magician. So he did like a lot of great parts, and then he did still work for Universal. Like they tended to tell, like Boris Karloff always got like higher pay and was like number one in the credits. But he did like the Black Cat. It was a really great role for him. He plays this was their first collaboration, Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi. And what it is Bela Lugosi plays a psychiatrist who had served at the fort where Boris Karloff was the leader during World War One. And Boris sold the fort out to the Russians, and then Bela he comes back for like revenge. And the whole movie, you think he's like, it's surprising because he's like playing like a kind of a dark hero, but a hero. And then at the end, he goes insane and skins Boris Karloff alive.
Oh my god!
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, so he was getting roles. It was just picking and choosing and going to different studios, but sadly getting paid less than Boris Karloff. It's like, I feel like if they would have put him in more of this stuff, they would have been like, oh, people want to see Bela too.
Yeah, right. Because he did like the roles he got, he did really great in. Like he was in The Raven. He played Dr. Edgar Allan Poe obsessed mad scientist. He was really good in that, and then he did he did a lot of other things too. Bela was really bad with his money as well. He had a very like live for the day, the heck with tomorrow kind of mentality, which you understand because of how close he was with death.
Yeah, given his life, given his life up until then. Yeah, I get that.
And then he was very generous with friends. He would he would specially import Hungarian sulfur water. Like
wow.
one time he didn't drive, only his wife did, but he bought 2 cars, and so he would so, and it was like, even guys, because like even when he still lived in Transylvania, when he was a struggling actor, oranges were really expensive there. They were about the same price of someone said they were about the same price of like Kobe beef, and he would buy like 12 oranges a day so he could have fresh squeezed orange juice every day.
So he was kind of bougie.
Yeah, he was bougie. Yeah. I love it. All right. So he would like spend money as soon as he got it. So sometimes so he was always like kind of desperate for work. So he was never able to really like haggle to get like the asking price up for his like salary, because
He just had to take something.
Like, yeah.
So did World War II affect his movie making at all, or?
There was actually, I think take it back a little bit. So with The Raven, it was considered, he plays a mad scientist obsessed with Edgar Allan Poe, and he has like the various torture devices in his cell. It was considered so horrifying that England banned horror films, so Hollywood stopped making them. And there was this 2-year period where Bela like got almost no work.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and he was expecting this
around. Yeah, I was gonna say, sorry, they did a really similar thing with comics, where horror comics nearly got banned. You couldn't say things like zombie, you couldn't do a bunch of other things. Yeah, you had to, there was a thing called the Comics Code Authority, and old comics that have it stamped on it have a very specific set of rules, and horror comics were some of the most impacted. So like EC Comics and all the ones who did a bunch of horror stuff were basically left.
Is that why some why some comics like use like the term walker and stuff like that instead of zombie and things? Is that where that comes from?
That's the walker part. I think is just Robert Kirkman doing The Walking Dead, but
that's fair.
But yeah, there were just so many very specific rules. So it's interesting that film was doing a really similar thing at the time.
You know, it affected Boris Karloff too, but really because Boris was already higher up, it really affected Bela. So there was, like I said, there was this like 2-year period where he didn't get like any film work, like barely at all, and he was expecting his wife were expecting their son. That's when he had the 2 cars.
Oh my god!
He actually had to sell some of his dogs that he loved, like because he just couldn't afford it. Yeah. Later he bought him. It was for a higher price, but he bought him back.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And there was but this 2-year period, and then there was this theater in Beverly Hills, and they had nothing to show, so they got themselves a hold of copies of Son of Kong, Frankenstein, and Dracula, and they ran it as a triple feature. And Son of Kong didn't do so hot, but the double feature of Dracula and Frankenstein drove lines around the block.
Yeah,
amazing.
Yeah, and so they Universal released it as a national double feature of Dracula and Frankenstein, and then they started making monster films again. He played Igor in Son of Frankenstein, and the director originally, the Universal told him to shoot all of Bela Lugosi. He was playing Igor, which was a really great role for him. It was completely different from Dracula. They told the director to shoot all the scenes together so that they would only have to pay him $500 a week for like just a couple weeks. But the director kept adding to the script and kept making his part bigger and bigger and bigger. So it'd be on for the whole production.
Longer. Yeah,
that's clever.
Yeah, and he is so great in this. Like he plays like the old assistant who would help Dr. Frankenstein, and he has a broken neck. And the son of Dr. Frankenstein asked him like, why is your neck broken? And he said, they hanged me once because I stole bodies. They said. And they threw me here and wouldn't put me in holy place like churchyard because I stole bodies. They said.
That's really good.
That's another one where he gets to act from head to toe. Just absolutely
so
every part of him,
so to go back to your question. So World War II, when Universal started making them again, they weren't hiring him at the same level as they had before. So at that point, he was working at like some of the getting like starring roles at some of the more low budget studios like Monogram, and he was doing more like supporting characters at Universal. Like in The Wolfman, he plays Bela the fortune teller, and it's a great role, but it's like a small. He had originally hoped to play the Wolfman actually. Around that time too, he had an old World War II injury, which was causing severe leg pain.
Mhm.
So his doctor prescribed him morphine, and on this, he was he needed money, so he was playing Frankenstein in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, which he was at that time he was already in his 60s, and because
Yeah.
Bela he was born in 1882, so he was already older by this point,
Yeah.
and he unfortunately he passed out on the set,
Oh my
and
God.
Universal stopped hiring. Yeah, and Universal stopped hiring him. They didn't hire him again until 1948 when they made Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
Wow.
Wow.
And even that was the same thing where he had to fight for the role again. He was hired like like in the meantime, like other actors were playing Dracula.
Oh wow.
Eh,
That
Yeah,
that's so like heartless of the company to not hire him just because like he was dealing with a medical issue. That's so
yeah,
yeah.
From the war.
From
You know
the
what I
yeah,
war.
mean? Like a war
yeah,
injury. This war veteran is in pain.
What the
yeah.
war veteran passed out on stage because of his medication? Get him out of
Right,
here. Like what?
yeah,
What?
yeah, and it was in the yeah, and I mean like there's nothing concrete saying that that's why they stopped hiring him, but like to me that's what it sounds like, you know,
Yeah. Yeah,
because
and it's like so many disabled people too. There are things where it's like this job didn't ask me back, I got demoted, this happened, and it's like they didn't say it's because of my disability, but
yeah,
you know what I mean?
Right.
Like
yeah,
it definitely was. Like it definitely
yeah, and
was. They just wouldn't admit it.
right, yeah, and his performance they really meddled with too, and it was because originally the reason he was cast as Frankenstein is in the previous film Ghost of Frankenstein, Igor's brain gets put in the monster's body. It was going to be Igor. In so he had lines where he spoke in Igor's voice, and in the script he had been made blind, but they changed it in the editing. They took out all his lines, and then they took out the references to him being blind. And that's why the monster has that. I know it's audio, but why the monster has that signature arm stretch out walk
Really?
is because he thought he was playing the blind character.
Huh.
Interesting. That's just become
That's
iconic.
so
Right?
Yeah, that's just an
Yeah, that's just
iconic,
become
like,
iconic. Just
zombie
Yeah.
Frankenstein thing. Just
yeah.
Right? Yeah.
That is so wild. Huh.
It's
That
so funny
explains
how
a
those
lot.
things get started. Yeah. That's a
Right,
really
yeah.
fun fact.
Thank you. And then but at the time like he never like stopped working. He always did like lots of live theater. And one of the shows he was famous. You guys ever heard of Arsenic and Old Lace?
I love Arsenic and Old Lace.
I have
It's
not.
so fun.
Yeah, he played Jonathan Brewster. He on Broadway it was Boris Karloff because in the original it was like written for Boris Karloff, and the famous running gag is they say to him, "You look like Boris Karloff," and then he gets real mad. For the tour, they offered it to Bela Lugosi, and it was on the condition the line be changed to "You look like Bela Lugosi," and
my
he agreed to
gosh.
do it.
Really funny.
There's a
But he
really fun film version of Arsenic and Old Lace we should watch, Violet.
Oh, you guys have got to see it. You'd
Yeah.
love it.
Oh yeah, I'm stoked.
But so he kept doing live theater, and that's just closer to the end of his life. He just kept doing live theater, right?
Yeah, so he was like it was yeah, he would do Dracula, Arsenic and Old Lace. So he did that became like one of his signature roles, and because and he would still get movie offers, but they tended to be for like lower films and
Yeah.
like low budget films. 1940, he did do Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. That was a great time for him. He got to play Dracula again. He took his son to the set. They all had lunch at the commissary, and Lon Chaney Jr. was made up as the Wolfman, and Glenn Strange was in Frankenstein makeup. And so that was a highlight. And then during the 50s, he also had a magic act too. That he
Really?
would do. Yeah, and he did say it was called the Great Bat Illusion. And what it worked sort of like the lady going in the disappearing cabinet act, where like she would disappear. So he would hypnotize her to go into the cabinet, and then they'd spin it around. But instead of it being empty, a bat would fly out.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
And then in the 50s, he met this low budget director named Ed Wood.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, and this is their first meeting when Ed Wood, he was making Glen or Glenda. When it was like a low budget film, it was by chance he was introduced to Bela Lugosi. So he offered him a part of the movie he was making. There was no real like part for him, but like he offered him one right away. And at first it was for $500. His wife Lillian, they needed the money, but Lillian said he'll do it for $1,000.
Talk about negotiating.
Right, Lillian was good at it. Bela not so much, but Lillian was good at it. And he created this like kind of like godlike part for him, the play where he like oversaw all the characters. And then him and Ed Wood really became friends. And they did he did Bride of the Monster. In his last film, Ed Wood had filmed some footage of him in his Dracula costume, kind of like wandering in the cemetery and some stuff at Tor Johnson's house, and then Bela died. So and Ed Wood made the script for Plan 9 from Outer Space around that footage. So his very fittingly, Bela Lugosi's last movie was after his death.
Oh wow.
That is so fitting for him.
That is perfect.
And even and we can't have a show without this. And for Bela Lugosi's funeral, his then ex-wife Lillian and son decided that it'd be appropriate for him to be buried in full Dracula costume.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Oh,
you know,
that's
just
amazing.
in case he rises again, he's already dressed for the occasion.
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to rise from the grave with your pants down, you know?
Right,
Yeah, he has to be dressed for the part.
You need full tuxedo and cape. Right?
Well, thank you so much, Bobby. Everyone can find Bobby on TikTok at the handle Lugosi Theater, which I'll have in the show details. So you can go follow him, and he has all sorts of really cool Dracula and Bela Lugosi stuff, and just really fun horror stuff in general. And really great, very positive content about being autistic. And I think you should all go follow him.
Yeah,
Thank
definitely.
you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I had so much fun with you guys.
Yeah,
awesome. Yeah, we had fun with you
so
too.
Excited. Well, thanks, Bobby.
Oh, I'm happy to. Thank you so much. And everyone have a happy Halloween.
Hey friends, I'm back with the housekeeping. So just the usual, if you want to see what Violet and I are up to on social media, make sure you check out the show details. If you want to get Bobby's info because you want to learn more about some very cool Bela Lugosi facts and Universal monsters, I also have his info in the show details. If you'd like to support the show, the best way you can do that is sharing the show with others. We don't have any paid ads on our network, and we also don't pay for ads to promote our show. So the way that we grow is entirely by word of mouth, and we've done that for our other show, Today's Lucky Winner. And y'all are great about sharing about our stuff. So if you want to help us out, that is the number one way you can help. You can share it wherever and just recommend it to someone who you think would like it, because that helps us out a ton. If you'd like to help us and you have the means to do so monetarily, you can become a patron of our Mixed Number Patreon, where you get bonus material for anything we've done and anything we're going to do with Mixed Number Productions, sort of in perpetuity. We have all of it there. So like for our other show, you get all of the music, like downloads for all the music on our show, right? And for just $1 a month, you get to join our Discord server where we get to hang out. And I just scheduled some streams for us to do, and that includes just like body doubling time with me, where I'm going to be writing season 3 of Today's Lucky Winner, and everyone can just kind of hang out and get their own work done, and it's like you're writing it with me. Also, I feel like I don't recommend this in the housekeeping section, but if by chance you are listening to this show and you have not checked out Today's Lucky Winner, that's the show we've been doing as a group for the past 3 years and some change, and I am currently in the middle of working on the 3rd season, and it is a fiction show, and I write it, and I voice act on it, and Violet voice acts on it, and we have a gang of queer little neurodivergent weirdos who make the show all together, and it's very fun. And if you like vampires and gay stuff and raunchy humor, it's probably your thing. Also, if you support us on Patreon, you can get a shout out at certain levels, like our friends Randy Lovings, Rachel Rachelson, Sewing Seraph, B. Trossler, Kelly Brennan, Smriti Singh, Helen Clifford, M. Mosen, and Lucy. If you also want to support the show, you can leave us a cute little review on whatever app you're using. That helps us get more people interested. And if you can kind of let them know what the show is about and why you like it, they're more likely to listen. So that would help us out a ton. And if there are any topics you want us to talk about more, like if we offhandedly mention something we're interested in on one of these episodes and you're like, no, do a whole episode on that, just like yell at us on the internet nicely. No, don't yell mean. I'm a baby, I will cry. But just nicely say like, hey, I would kind of like it if you did a whole episode on that. But yeah, that's what I've got for y'all, and we'll see you next time.